We'd like to thank Ms. Amber Webb Booker for this program to open up the eyes of many right here on BPEN TV.
Hi everybody. Um, so I haven't made a video in a very long time. Actually, since my Bible studies, I'm coming back. There's a whole nother topic. But I actually wanted to make one today about the Botham Jean case because so much misinformation has been being disseminated across social media. And recently I've been writing a whole lot of really long posts. And I mean, I'm a trial lawyer, I know better. And so I know that some people read that, but most people don't read stuff that's that long. And I mean, I already know that. So I feel like as a lawyer, as a former prosecutor, as somebody who loves the Lord, who loves my people, who quite frankly loves people, period, and who loves justice, who believes that the ideas about justice and fairness and equality fundamentally should be reflected throughout our society. I believe that those things are not just stuff that we should sit around and talk about. That is something that should be a commitment that should be walked out in our everyday society. And it breaks my heart when I see that not happening. And I hate when things like Mr. John's death occur and I see rightful righteous indignation, but I see people exploiting that righteous indignation and playing on it. And I see people being misinformed and acting on misinformation. And ultimately, the things that we want to accomplish are not being accomplished because we're not being strategic. We are acting from a place of hurt and emotion as opposed to channeling our emotion and our anger towards the greater cause of demanding that justice and fairness and equality be administered equally for everybody, that the promise that America makes be lived out. And so I feel like I have a responsibility as somebody who's got some knowledge, some training and experience to set the record straight on a few things. So as a trial lawyer, I'm not going to be here long because I already know what time it is. I'm going to tell you what my basic points are. Then I'm going to back my basic points up with facts because I think that's a problem. A lot of people who are at the forefront of the movement don't know what they're talking about, okay? So I am a lawyer, I'm a former prosecutor, and I have a special anointing for not talking when I don't know what I'm talking about, okay? So with that being said, let me tell you what my 3 basic points are today. My first point is that we've got to put some strategy behind our anger. And in doing that, we've got to look at the big picture. And in looking at the big picture, right now, the protests are not working in our favor. That's my first point. The second point is that the entity that we need to have our anger directed at right now is not the judge that executed the search warrant, okay? So I'm going to explain all of that later. But that's just the second point. Hold that in your pocket. And finally, I'm going to tell you why the Dallas Police Department and the Texas Rangers have done us the biggest favor that they could ever do us. They have already given us all the facts we need to clearly demonstrate that this is not a manslaughter, this is actually a murder. And as a community, if we play our cards right, and if we hold them accountable in effective ways, we can chin check them and make them bring charges that reflect the facts that they've already put out into the public domain. Okay? So let's start with number 1. Why the protests are not effective. The unfortunate truth of the matter is, is that Mr. John is the victim. He is the victim. But the person who is most important in the eyes of the law right now is Amber Geiger. The chief aim of the criminal justice system is to protect the right of the criminal accused. So what happens when we create a frenzy that makes it appear that people are angry, people are acting from a place of emotion, people are unwilling or unable to apply the law impartially, that sets the scene for a defendant's attorney to be able to do what's called file a motion to transfer venue. Now, the general rule is that when a crime occurs, the county in which the crime occurs is the county that has jurisdiction to try the criminal defendant. So in this case, Mr. John was killed in Dallas County. So we would normally expect that Dallas County would be the place where Amber Geiger would be tried, unless her attorneys were able to successfully convince a court that she would not be able to have a fair and impartial trial here, because that is her constitutional right, part of due process. Due process, the right that every person is afforded under the 5th and 14th Amendments, is the right to have a fair hearing that is impartial, where the law is applied apart from emotions that keep a fact finder from being biased towards you, okay? So all these protests, all of these social media posts that incorrectly imply romantic relationships, all of the things that we are doing that direct our anger in wrong ways are simply setting this defendant up to file a motion to transfer venue. Because what her attorneys are going to say is that the media here has been so saturated with factual information about this case that it has basically tainted the potential jury pool. So much so that it would be impossible to seat a jury that could fairly and impartially apply the law to the facts of this case. And when we demonstrate emotional outrage on TV, on social media, all we're doing is handing her attorneys exhibits to present in court. And let me tell you something. The police, her homies that are leaking this information to the court, to the media rather, I'll get to that later, they know that. That's why they're trying to set us off. Okay? So keep that in mind. We want this case tried in Dallas County by citizens of Dallas County, because that's where Mr. John lived and that's where the accused live. And as citizens of Dallas County, we deserve a right to administer justice to the offense that occurred in our county. And we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our ability to do that. So we got to be strategic. Secondly, y'all, this whole warrant thing with Judge Birmingham, that thing was shared like 10,000 times. That is wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Brandon Birmingham is a good judge. He was a prosecutor while I was a prosecutor. Let me tell y'all something. A judge has one function in a criminal case, okay? Now, let's remember, Mr. John's home became a crime scene once Amber Geiger made it a crime scene, okay? So when 911 is called, the police can come into your home for the purposes of addressing the emergency that you call 911 for, right? They can come in, they can handle the emergency. But once the emergency is over, the regular rules imposed by the 4th and 14th Amendments go back into place. Because remember, Mr. John's residence that Amber Geiger trespassed into, okay, that was a private place. That wasn't a public place. So the general rules for private property are that the government cannot enter private property unless two things take place, and this is broadly. There are some exceptions, but we ain't got time for that. The owner or the possessor gives consent, which obviously could not occur because Amber Geiger killed the possessor of the premises, or there is a warrant signed by a judge. Now remember, once the emergency was over, once the police had taken Mr. John to the hospital, once the police had arrested or escorted Amber Geiger off the scene, the emergency was over. So there was no way they could come back in unless they had a search warrant. But obviously, because that was a crime scene, they needed to go back in and collect evidence. Now, at that point in time, no one knew exactly what had happened. So a search warrant, broadly giving the police authority to collect all kinds of evidence, is not only appropriate, but it's normal, because you don't know why they got into it. Did they know each other? Was this a drug deal gone bad? Was this a scorned lover thing? So the fact that the warrant would give them the right to search for drugs was not to impugn Mr. John at all. That is just normal, because it's not what the police are looking for at that point. It's what they're trying to rule out. So it wasn't that Judge Birmingham gave a search warrant for Mr. John's home. It's that he gave a search warrant for a crime scene, because the only question that he was evaluating at the time when he looked at that warrant was, is there probable cause for the police to execute a warrant for these premises? And the answer was yes, because a crime occurred there. A crime occurred there. So he had not only a right, but a duty to sign that warrant. So stay woke, friends. The issue is not that he signed the warrant. The issue is, why was information about irrelevant marijuana leaked to the media by law enforcement? That's the issue. You see what I'm saying? Because signing warrants for crime scenes to collect evidence is degular. Judges do it every day. It is a standard part of their job. It's a standard part of their job. Every crime scene that happens on private property requires a warrant for law enforcement to subsequently re-enter to collect evidence. So the question is not why was the warrant signed. The question is, why did the police leak to the media that marijuana was in Mr. John's home when they had nothing to do with why he was killed? Is it because they're trying to protect their fellow officer and perpetrate a narrative that serves her interest because they have her back? Because let me tell you what I know. Brandon Birmingham signed the warrant, but he wasn't there when they executed it. So when they found the weed, he ain't know. He ain't know they found no weed in that man's apartment. He didn't know. He didn't know. He wasn't the one that tipped the media off. The people who have an interest in protecting Amber Geiger and facilitating a narrative that helps her interest are the people who told the media that. So the question is not, why did the judge sign a warrant to collect evidence at a crime scene? That's exactly what we want the judge to do. Because once this case goes to trial, we want the jury to have everything that they need in order to be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the state has met its burden of proof as to the charges it's bringing. So that was entirely appropriate. What is not appropriate, what is not standard, is when law enforcement piecemeal releases selective information to the media about things that aren't relevant to the offender, but are relevant to the victim in furtherance of the offender's agenda, because the law enforcement, the investigating agency, has an interest in protecting and promoting the agenda of the alleged offender. Stay woke, friends. Stay woke. And I'm going to tie all of this up in just a few minutes. So the responsibility for that lies exclusively with law enforcement and the media. The narrative that they have been perpetrating from the beginning has been very intentional. And it has been to benefit Amber Geiger. And that is what happens when you have an investigating agency that is biased, investigating a crime, and they have a relationship with the offender. The narrative demeans and diminishes the victim because the law enforcement knows exactly what they're doing. The media loves a good narrative about a tainted black victim. And these law enforcement agents were thrilled to give these hungry wolves exactly what they wanted because they knew they would take it and run with it. And they knew we would get outraged and go run and direct our anger at everybody but who it should be directed at. Okay? So now let's tie all of this up with a nice bow. The police are banking on the fact that we're going to be more mad than we are smart, but the devil is a lie. Let me tell you something. The wonderful thing about what happens when you tell more than one story is that eventually you got to pick one. So now the story on the table right now is that good Sister Geiger went through the door and walked into Mr. John's home and gave him verbal commands. Gave him verbal commands in his own home. And told him to do something or not do something, and he disregarded those commands. And then she shot him. Now, initially, your visceral response is to be so offended by how somebody could walk into another person's home and give them verbal commands. But let me tell you something. That is the best thing that law enforcement has done for us since this whole thing has happened. Let me tell you why. The definition of manslaughter is acting with reckless disregard for human life, okay? That means that a killing occurred because you recklessly disregarded human life. That is why the overwhelming majority of manslaughter deaths in Dallas are deaths that happen in cars. Usually when a person is intoxicated, you have intoxication manslaughter because you know that when a person got in the car, they didn't get in the car saying, I'm about to go kill Sally Johnson on Highway 75 at 75 in Mockingbird. No. But the fact that they got into a car and they did not have full control of their mental and physical faculties was sufficient evidence that they were acting with reckless disregard for human life, because nobody should drive a car when they're not in control of their mind or their body. And doing so is a reflection of the fact that you're disregarding somebody else's life, right? So that's an example of a manslaughter charge. Let me tell you what murder is, okay? Murder is an intentional, premeditated killing. Now, oftentimes we think about premeditated like this, like, I need to go to Walmart and buy gloves, trash bags, and bleach. Now, that is a type of premeditation, but premeditation doesn't have to be that long. It could just be a few seconds or a few minutes. The law simply requires that you have enough time to have some forethought about your actions. Now, if I walk into an apartment that I think is mine, now, because they've been talking about accidental entrance all day, call it what you want. She went into the apartment on purpose because she thought it was hers. And then she proceeded to see an intruder and gave him verbal commands that, according to her and according to the probable cause affidavit, the alleged intruder disregarded. That, my friends, is not reckless disregard for human life. That is an intentional, premeditated killing. That means you gave a verbal command, You decided that the person's response to the verbal command was not what you wanted it to be, and thus you intended to fire a firearm to shoot that person because they responded in a manner that was not satisfactory to you in response to the command that you gave. That is murder. That is not acting with intent, with reckless disregard for human life. That's murder all day long. So, now that you know we're smarter than the average bears, let me tell you what we do with the facts that they've handed us. We don't go crucifying a good judge. The same judge that denied the transfer of venue motion in Roy Oliver's case, who presided over the Jordan Edwards trial, the 15-year-old who was killed in Balk Springs. We don't go crucifying a good judge for doing his job. Let me tell you what we do. We direct all of our energy with laser precision and focus on the investigating agencies. So we got 3 agencies we need to be looking at right now. Dallas Police Department, Texas Rangers, and the District Attorney's Office. Now, the agency that I think is going to give us the less trouble is the District Attorney's Office, because Faith Johnson is up for election in November. And I think she already knows what time it is. I think the agencies that we need to have our eyes on are Texas Rangers and Dallas Police Department. And we need to be asking the hard questions. Explain to us how you reconcile knowing that somebody gave a verbal command that was disregarded, and you classify that as reckless disregard for human life when that's premeditated and intentional. Explain that to us. Explain to us what evidence you have that comports with that being reckless disregard. Explain to us what the evidence is. Explain to us what you have found from the witnesses. We need to keep our eyes on those law enforcement agencies, because if we don't, they are not going to do a thorough investigation. They are going to play on our emotions. They're going to have us running around chasing our tails. And meanwhile, they are going to drop the ball, hope that her defense attorneys get a motion to transfer venue, get her into a conservative venue, and get an acquittal. Y'all don't fall for the okie doke today. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. So the way we get justice is by letting them know we know what's up. We know our rights. We know our information. So we're done playing the fool. Everybody plays the fool sometimes. But we done. We've been delivered. Okay? So now our eyes are on you. And we have questions. And we're not going to go away until we get answers. And that's what we need to do. And that's how we honor Mr. Jones' life. That's how we effectively and efficiently demand justice. And that's how we let them know they can't play us for no fools. Okay? All right. So we're going to stay woke. We're going to stay prayed up. And we're going to stay pursuing justice. And we're going to stay loving each other. And we're going to stay loving other people. And we're not going to allow the hurt and the pain to make us bitter. We're going to allow it to make us better. And we're going to allow this to put energy in our tank that pushes us towards making changes that result in permanent, tangible benefits. So hopefully our kids, my kids, your kids, they don't have to face this. All right? So I'm Amber Webb Booker. I am an attorney. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I'm a Jesus lover. I am a believer in the cause of justice. I believe Black Lives Matter. And I just want my people to be informed. All right? So y'all stay blessed.
The preceding program are not the views of BPEN TV. We hope you enjoyed the show.